Alrighty, so I'm going to attempt to explain to you the D flip-flop and the JK flip-flop. I understand how the D flip-flop works. The JK is really complicated. I still haven't actually figured out exactly what goes on when you work it. But the D flip-flop I can definitely explain to you. So, the D flip-flop, it's got the set, reset signals, the D signal, and then the clock signal. The clock works like a gate. It will connect over kind of like this, except without the two signals up here at the top. So when the clock turns on, it's just an AND gate that allows the signal to flow through. So like imagine this was the D and D naught down here. So if D is 1 and D naught is 0, and then clock would have to be 1, again without this input, it would turn it into a 0 signal, because this is a 1, 1 into a not gate, which would be 0, and turns it into a 1. So the clock signal over here on the D gate works like an enable. It just allows the D signal to pass through. So the D flip-flop has D and not D naught as the two inputs. So you can only ever have two genuine tables, because if D is 1, then D naught is 0. If D is 0, D naught is 1. You can't have D as 1 and D naught as 1. It just doesn't work. So with the case of D1 and D naught, you would push it through and you would get a 1 down into the exclusive or not, the not OR gate. And then a 1 and a 1 is going to give you a 1 knotted into a 0. So the 0 passes through into here, so Q naught is 0, and then follows up through here to 0 again. So we have D naught is 0, and D output of this gate is 0. So 0, 0 equals a 0, knotted into a 1. Now if you follow the signal up here, the 1 doesn't matter because it's already a 1. It's going to stay the same as a 0 output. And now the 1 signal also travels up through here, like I said, to there, and travels out to the Q output, which is 1. So whenever D is 1, D naught is 0, and it just basically you see the signal of 1 can flow through to Q. That's all you're really doing with the D flip-flop. Is if D is 1, then Q is 1. If D is 0, then Q is 0. The same thing happens through here, just in reverse. Like you'll see. 1, passing through into a 0, passing through into a 0, lost myself. Then a 0, 0 passes into a 1, and then the 1 outputs here, and the 0 outputs here. So a D flip-flop is just again, whatever D is, Q is. And now, like I said, the clock here, this input I didn't cover over here. I just didn't think about when I drew the diagram. But you need the clock to be a 1 signal to enable the signal of pardon me, of the D. Now, the clock signal works by activating on this rising edge. How it does that is it goes through it goes through another another gate. So this would be the clock input. If it were 1, this 1 signal travels through the circuit faster and will signal a 1 to the clock, which is over here. So when the clock goes 1, it turns high, and then but I'm sorry. So it travels through and is a 1, but it's also traveling through this circuit, and I'm not 100% certain because I haven't actually been explicitly told this, but I'm fairly positive that because in a real working circuit there's still some kind of lag time, which means that while this is flowing through here, this is also flowing through here. And so if this goes this direction, it's going this direction also, and has to travel through this NOT gate to invert the signal. So if it's a 1, it sends through a 1, but is also sending through a 1 here, which is a 1 knotted into a 0. So by the time that this 0 passes through, it's following a 1, so it would go like that. The 1 signal goes through to turn the signal high, and then the 0 signal follows through to turn it to a low. So that's how the clock signals on a rising input, and doesn't just signal continuously on this high input. Because it's a 1, the input for the clock is 1, but the actual circuit only accepts a very, very small window of a 1. But it's 0 the rest of the time, but it's just easier to look at it like this, because this is the signal. So the set and reset buttons are indicated here on the D flip-flop. I didn't talk about them down here because this is the main circuit that is dependent on the input. I believe it was covered in the lesson, but these are synchronous inputs, meaning that it needs the clock input to activate, and these are asynchronous inputs, meaning that they do not depend on the clock. So whatever these are will change the signal without the clock being active. So what that means is, oh, and also these are not inverted signals. So a 0 is a 1 and a 1 is a 0, meaning that when set is high, it's a 0 in the actual circuit, so nothing happens. But when it's low, that's when the signal turns high inside the circuit and will toggle whatever is in there. Now this set signal is set to toggle a high output when set is 0. So no matter where in the circuit the set signal happens, if it's a low, the Q is high. The same thing with reset, but in inverse. So reset is a low signal. So set is high, reset is low. Set will turn the signal high, reset will turn the signal low. So if we follow through this timing diagram I made for D, and again, D signals on the rising trigger of the clock. So when D is 0, Q is 0. And now you'll see here I have it set to where D is 1, but the signal doesn't change down here. Now that is because it's not triggering on the rising input of D. If this was over here a little bit, then it would signal it up. Now, over here you'll see the Q actually rises, and that's because the drawing's a little off with it. I meant to make it exact, where because set is 0, it raises Q to high. It didn't depend on where the clock was, it just set it high. So here's the rising edge of the clock, and if you look, it's up here and sets it to 1. So the signal was set to 1 thanks to the set input, and remains 1 until the following output. But you'll see again, I have it set to where the D is high on the rising edge. So then it remains high for a very, very small window of time, because the reset, which is low now, right here, this small little window is low, it signals the signal low. So it follows through and then trickles up to high because D is high again. So what that all boils down to is Q is D unless one of these two are pushed. And Q is D only on the rising edge of the clock. So I hope that makes sense for the D flip-flop, because that's how I understand it. Now, this JK flip-flop is a son of a bitch. It's weird to understand, and I think you already know this. So, the JK flip-flop works by having two signals, the J and the K. J is the set, K is the reset. So if J, and again, this is just it's kind of the same thing as this thing, just with a couple of different gates to make it work correctly. So if J is 1, Q will be 1. If J is 0, If K is 1, then Q will be a 0, because the J is the set and K is the reset. So whenever J is 1, Q will be 1. Whenever K is 0, whenever K is 1, Q will be 1. No, I have that written wrong. No, that's written right. Apologies. So that's the basic function of how the JK flip-flop works. Now, the reason we use a JK flip-flop is because of these two little attached signals here at the end that funnel back into the signal. So what this does is, and I'm not 100% certain how this works because the timing diagrams are weird and it doesn't exactly make sense, but the output still works the same way. So if we had J as 1, Q would be 1. And now that's important because the signal input of 1, 1 depends on what the signal was. So if J is 1, it's going, oh, apologies, this is the 1, 1 signal is called the toggle signal, and toggle just means inverts whatever the signal was. So like I said, it does depend on what the last signal was. So if J is 1 and you have a new input of a 1, 1, it's going to flip whatever the thing was, because it's constantly sending out the signal. It'll push through the and again, I can't explain it like I did on this one because I don't fully understand how this circuit works. I just know what it does. So it'll take it and flip it, and because of this clock input, it's only happening once. So if J is 1, it's going to flip it back to a 0. If J is 0, it's going to flip it to a 1. It just flips whatever it was. And now I can show you that on the actual homework. Let me not do that. So this is the rising edge triggered JK flip.